Hey folks, in this episode we're going to be learning how to make this motion graphic here. It can be used as advertising asset if you're doing some client work and they want to bring some awareness for a new product or service they're releasing, or if they just want general brand awareness, this will be great for that. I'm doing it for an Etsy store which is advertising a Christmas sale. We're not going to be making these particles here, the snow particles. I've got a separate tutorial that covers that. We're also not going to be modelling the cups, the canvases, the pillows, etc. There's plenty of YouTube tutorials on how to do that. I'll probably do a couple of YouTube tutorials how to model a couple of these in the future, but for now we're going to focus on the motion graphic elements of this scene. Without further ado, let's get to it. So I'll close this down. We're going to open up Blender, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our aspect ratio. You can keep it at 1920 by 1080 if you want, but I'm going for the vertical aspect ratio, so I'm going for 1080 by 1920. So 1080 by 1920. So I've now got the vertical aspect ratio there. I'm also going to go to my settings. Oh no, we'll go back here to the scene settings, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to 30 frames a second, because that's always good for online content like YouTube and TikTok and all the other platforms. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a background. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane, and I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to hit S10 to scale that up by 10. Tab out of edit mode, then I'm going to hit RX90 to rotate it on the X-axis by 90 degrees. I'm also going to bring this back GY. Yeah, we'll go for 5 notches, so that's half a meter. From here, I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh, and we'll go for circle. Go into top view mode. Let's bring it down to 16. I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit ES for extrude and scale. I'm holding down Control to snap it to the grid. Then I'm going to hit Control F and use grid fill. With the grid fill, I'm going to change the offset so the topology is all nice and neat, pointing towards the viewport. Tab out of edit mode, go into front face view and hit RX90 for rotate on the X-axis by 90 degrees. I'm also going to hit Control 2, and that's going to add a subdivision surface on level 2 over here. Alternatively, you can just go into your modifiers, add modifier, subdivision surface, and then pop that up to 2. In fact, I might even change the render up to 4. So from here, I'm going to select my camera, go to the camera settings, I'll go to viewport display, and I'm going to go to composition guides and click thirds. It should come up with this grid here where we've got thirds on the view. I might even change my camera focal length to say 50mm. I'll click this circle here. I might scale it up by say S2, so it's scaled up by 2, and then going to hit G, Z, and I'm going to drag that until the bottom of the circle reaches this third here. The idea is we want to compose our scene with the rule of thirds just so it's visually pleasing, and then I'm going to hit Shift D and Z, and we'll drag this down to around about there. Now I'm going to have the logo in the corner here, the Etsy logo, and I don't want it overlapping, so I'm going to actually have to pull these back a bit. Left click, select this one, shift left click, select this one, go to side view, and we'll just check the distance of that. Okay, I might even go into wireframe just so I can see what I'm doing. Go to wireframe, hit 3 for side view, and then I'm going to hit G, Y, and then we'll just drag that to around about there. I'm probably going to have to change my composition a bit yet, because these have moved now where I've changed the distance. So I'm going to hit G, Z, and we'll just drag this up. G, Z, and we'll drag this down just so it lines up. So then I'm going to select this circle, hit Shift D, and then I'll go to side view. I'm going to drag that forward, G, Y, Control, and drag it forward just so it's not touching. Okay, from here I'm then going to scale this right down, and then I'm going to hit G, Shift Y. I want the origin of the circle to be in the top corner here, so I'm going to hit G, Shift Y to drag it on every axis but the Y axis, and then once the origin is in that corner, I'm then going to hit S, and we're just going to scale that down so this edge comes into this third here. I'll just check that I haven't shifted that. No, excellent. So the next element will be like a cross section over here where I want the logo to appear. So I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh plane. I'm going to hit RX90 and I'll rotate it by RY45. So it's rotating it on the Y-axis by 45 degrees. G, Shift Y, and I'll just drag this down to around about here. Go into side view, go back into wireframe so I can see everything. So the last one was on this line, so G, Y, and I'll drag that to about there. Just make sure this is lined up. See, I kind of want it in a medium point between this cross section here and this cross section here. So I'm probably going to have to scale this up slightly, so I'm just going to scale it up just to ensure we've got plenty of room. G, Shift Y to drag it on every axis but the Y axis. So this distance here is roughly the same as this distance here, so it's intersecting on these thirds. I'm not going to be modelling the actual cups and products themselves. Instead, I'm going to be opening up image textures of the mock renders. They're called mock images. So what I might do is I'll select this circle here. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate and then Shift Y to drag it on every axis but the Y axis. I want it in the centre, same distance here to the same distance there, in the centre of this third. I'm also going to scale it down to, let's say, around about there-ish. GX. I'll go into side view and then I'm going to bring this GY all the way to there. Go into camera view. I'm going to have to drag this again, G, Shift, Y. In fact, I might divide this box up a bit more. I'm going to scale that up slightly to around about there. It doesn't even matter if we overlap these, by the way, but I want the whole thing to be in view. I'm then going to hit Shift D, escape, so I should have a duplicate, okay. Then G, Shift, Y. I'm going to drag this to around about here. So what I'm looking to do is this space between here and here is divide it into roughly 3 equal parts. We'll scale this down and then we'll drag this X over a third. So we're going to divide this into 3, divide this into 3, and this should intersect roughly on the third of each one. So the gap will be roughly about the same. Maybe scale it up slightly. Shift D, Z, G, Z. We'll drag that up. Now to ensure that they scale at the same size, I'm going to go to here and I'm going to select individual origins, then scale to around about there. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe we can drag them on the x-axis, so GX, just drag them over slightly. I'll change my individual origins back to median point. So there's the basic elements. Now let's give it a bit of colour first. So I'm going to go into viewport shading, open up my shader editor. So the background I might have, say, a darkish grey, maybe a medium kind of grey. I want it quite dark actually because I want the products to stand out. This circle is going to be where my Etsy logo is, and Etsy is orange. Within the colour section you can go to your hex value, you can find the colours online, and then you punch in the hex value here for something a bit more accurate. I'm just going to wing it for now, so it's just going to eyeball it, see what happens. Maybe darken that down slightly. And also we're going to be using complementary colours in a way. If this colour is going to be like a brownish colour, which will complement the Etsy logo, the opposite to brown would be blue. So then with these circles I'm going to select a new material and we'll set it to kind of a bluey tinge. Not too blue, just enough. So I'm going to select this object and then we'll go material 002. Maybe we don't want it too dark, I don't know. We're just kind of winging it for now. This item here, I'm actually going to change it to black. It's kind of a neutral colour. Well, not black, but a really dark grey. My logo is black and gold mainly, or black and white. We'll stick to black for that one. For these objects here, we're going to have to UV unwrap these. So I'm going to apply the scale. I'm shift clicking all of them and then I'm going to hit Control A and apply the scale. For this next part, it might be handy to enable the node wrangler. So go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons and then type in Node and then enable the node wrangler here. When you've enabled that, we'll go into UV editing. I'm going to hit 1. Let's go out of edit mode. I'm just going to select this circle. I'm going to select all the vertices. I'm going to hit U, project from view, bounds. I'm going to do the same for this one. Maybe I should have done the UV unwrapping first when I would have only had to do it once. Then U, project from view, bounds, and the same as this one. Select all the vertices, U, project from view bounds. So now we've got the UV maps. Let's add the textures, go back into shading. So I'm going to add a new material, and this is where the node wrangler comes in handy. I'll click the principal BSDF and I'm going to hit Control T. It's going to introduce the sequence of nodes here. Before I go any further, it's a good idea to save your project, so I'm just going to save my project. You can name it whatever you like. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to open up the image. So let's open up my phone cover. For this one, I'm going to do the same. Add new, select the principal BSDF, hit Control T. I'll open up another image texture. Maybe we'll have the cushion. And we'll do the same for this one. Add a new material, select the principal BSDF, hit Control T, open up image, and maybe for this one we'll go, I'll add a canvas, which is the draft. From here we're going to UV editing. I'm also going to enable my viewport shading. So the draft, I'll go to my UVs over here, I'm going to hit S, I'm going to scale this up to around about there. I'm going to do the same for this psychedelic tiger cushion, scale this up, and then we'll do the same for this object here as well. So I'll select all the vertices in my UV editor, and we'll scale this down. So I go back into my shading editor. Now we'll add some text. Okay, Cambria regular is the closest text I could find for Etsy. I'm going to hit Shift C to recenter my cursor, and then I'm going to hit Shift A, add text, RX90 to rotate it on the X-axis by 90 degrees. I'm also going to change the alignment to center, and then I'm going to select the font, Cambria regular. Okay. The scaling is completely off on this one. I don't know why, it's a bit of a dodgy font, but you know, it is what it is. I'm also going to hit G, and we'll just drag this up to around about there. Okay. And then I hit G, Shift Y. I'm going to drag this over to around about here. Go into edit mode, delete that. I'm going to type in Etsy. We're going to add a new material to this as well, maybe pure white, no specular, and complete roughness. I'm also going to scale that up and rotate it on the Y by 45 degrees minus, so negative 45 degrees. And then I'm going to hit G, Shift Y, and we're just going to place that around about there. So then with the Etsy selected, I'm going to hit Shift left click select the disk, and I'm going to hit Control P to parent it, and we're going to keep transform. So now when I've got the disk selected, the Etsy text is going to follow it, and also if I hit RY, then it's going to rotate along with it as well. So now I'm going to add a bit more text. For example, up here I'm going to add the cell details. Let's add an empty first for a controller. Add empty cube. I'm going to scale that cube in. I'm going to go into wireframe view for this actually. I'm going to hit SY. We're just going to scale this in to something quite small, maybe half of that as well. SY. Just scale it into about there. Let's put it roughly in the right position, so it's going to be just in front of this big circle here. I select that cube, hit G, just in front of that disk. Then I go into my camera view, and then going to hit SZ. We'll scale that on the Z axis. I'm also going to want this center point on the third, so I hit G, Shift Y. That's going to be on the center point there, and then SX. And our text is going to be parented to this object here. SZ, we'll just scale that up a bit. GZ, okay. The distance from here to here, again, I either want to divide it completely in half or by 2/3 and have this on the third. I'll probably do it on the third, roughly. Got a similar amount of padding here, here, and here. I'm going to hit Shift S, and then we're going to go cursor to selected. I'm just going to duplicate this object. Shift D, and then Shift Y, and then I'm just going to drag this down here for another text object. With the cursor selected to the origin of this empty, I'm going to hit Shift A, add text, and then RX90, and we'll also center that. We'll scale it down, go into edit mode by hitting tab, and I'll type in Christmas cell. Scale this in. I'm going to choose another font, Arial. By the way, if your fonts don't appear when you click this button here, I'll show you how to do that. Hang on, I'll just select my font, Arial Bold. Yeah, so if your fonts don't appear there, what you do is you go into edit mode, you go into your preferences, you go to file paths, and where it says fonts here, you put in the location of your system fonts. Mine's C Windows fonts. If you're on Windows, that's where yours should be. I'm not sure where it'll be on Linux, but yeah, that's how you do it. I've got the Christmas cell selected. I'm also going to apply the material to that, which was material 007. Hit G, Z, so Christmas cell, and then maybe copy that, so Shift D, Z, and we'll say 45% off. Go out of edit mode. I'm going to select that original font what we had, the Cambria regular. We'll scale this up to around about the same size. Might have to drag it across a bit. GX, G, Z, and then I'll select this font, hit Shift D, go to Z, and then 24th of October to 19th of November. Maybe give it a bit more padding, so GZ, a bit more breathing space. Let's just check that out so far. You'll probably have to work a bit more on your typography here. It's I haven't done a great job. This is just mainly for the motion graphics, this tutorial. So I'm going to left click select for Christmas cell, shift left click select for 45, and shift left click select the date, and then finally I'll shift left click select the empty, and I'm going to hit Control P, so parent to the object, keep transform, and then if I select this empty, it should all follow with it. We just do one more down here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then Shift A, add text, and then RX90. Again, we're going to center that. Center, we'll scale down, we'll delete this, type in visit my store. We'll scale this in. I'll just scale this in as well. Again, we want the this to in line with this third here. GZ. We'll have it around about the halfway mark between this third here. We'll scale it up slightly. Select this one, shift select this one, and then hit Control P. Again, object, keep transform. I'm going to add my logo here. I'm going to hit Shift C to center my cursor. So for my logo, I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh, plane. I'm going to hit RX90. I'm going to drag this forward so it's in front of everything. GY, G, Shift Y to drag it on every axis but the Y axis. We'll scale this in. In fact, I'm going to select this corner vertice. By the way, you can change between vertices, edge and face mode by hitting 1 for vertice, so that's these, 2 for edge mode, so you can select the edges, and 3 for face, so hit 1 for vertice mode. So I'm going to select this vertice, I'm going to hit Shift S, and I'm going to add cursor to selected, and then I'll go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. So now it should just scale from that corner. So I'm going to hit G, Shift Y, I'm going to take this right into the corner here, and then I'm going to scale that up to around about there. Okay, and then Shift A, apply the scale, add a new material. With the material, I'm going to hit Control T to add this string of nodes. I'll open up my logo, the PNG. Okay, I'm happy with that. To give it a bit of transparency here, I'm just going to plug it into the alpha. Plug the alpha into the alpha, and I'll change it from sRGB to non-color data. I'll probably have to change this as well to alpha blend, take off backface. So I'm also going to change the color to sort of a goldy color. In fact, I've actually made a node for that, so metal color, and then I'll just plug my gold into there and then turn metallic all the way up, and maybe have a roughness of 0.25. So I'm going to save the file, and now we're going to move on to animation. So the animation process should be pretty straightforward. You're going to need to open up a couple of things. You're going to have your timeline open, and preferably this graph editor. If you don't know how to open up the graph editor, click to the bottom of one of your viewports with this little crosshair. you can close it, and if you click at the top left hand corner, you can open up a fresh window. And with this fresh window open, you then go to this option here, and then you click Graph Editor. So the first thing we're going to do is on frame 1, we want the Etsy logo to rotate on the y-axis. I'm going to hit RY90, so that's going to be the start point. We'll also have this off the screen, so I'm going to hit GX and we'll just drag this off the screen to around about there, the same as these products here. Let's just move these a minute. So I'm going to hit GZ, I'm going to drag this up to around about there, and I'll drag this one down, GZ, to around about there. So the cross point is hitting these intersections here. With this one, I'll hit GX, we'll grab this to around about there, this one, GZ, down to around about there. The reason I'm leaving quite a bit of gap here is because I don't want the shadow of these to be cast in the scene. I want it to be a nice clean background. So I hit this, GX, and we'll bring this round to about there. The same as this, GX, we'll drag this out to about here. And this logo, I'm going to hit RY90, so then that's out of the scene. And then visit my store, GX, we'll just drag this out. This GZ, we'll drag this down to about there, and this one GZ, we'll drag this up to around about there. I want these two circles to come into the scene at the exact same time as this rotates into the scene. On frame 1, I'm going to hit I on location. Alternatively, instead of doing keyframes like that, we can just click this box here to the object properties, and then I'll hit a keyframe there. I'll hit this one, I'll add a keyframe there, and then on the Etsy symbol, I'll add a keyframe there. I want this to fit to music that's 120 beats per minute. In that case, I'll have 240 frames. Every 15 frames is going to be a beat. Over a period of 15 frames, I want that element to come in, this element to come in, and this element to come in. If I go to frame 15, and then I'll change the rotation on the y-axis on here to 0, and then I'll add a keyframe, and then I want this to enter on frame 15 as well, so I hit GZ, we'll bring that to there, and then I'll add a keyframe, and the same as with this one, GZ, and I want to add a keyframe there. I want this circle. We'll go back to frame 15, and then I'll add a keyframe on the X location, and then we go to frame 30, and then hit GX, and we'll bring this across to the center intersection point there. We'll add a keyframe, and then we'll go 45 degrees, and we'll add a keyframe there. We'll also add a keyframe on frame 30 on this empty object on the X location, and then we skip another 15 frames, so that'll be frame 45, and then we can bring this back out to where it's meant to be, GX, drag it back to there, and we'll change the rotation to 0 there, and then this will come in to play. Hit GX, bring this to around about where it was before, and we'll add a keyframe. Let's just see what we've got to make sure it's all working. From here, I want the mock-up images. If you've got 3D assets, you can add the 3D assets. I actually just use these as empties, and then later on I can replace this with an actual 3D model, which I'll parent to this object, and then I'll just hide this object. As this comes in, I want this to come in too. So I'm going to select this object here. We go to frame 30, we'll select this object, we'll hit a keyframe on the X location, and then on frame 45 we want this to come in to play. GX, just bring this in to that median point, add a keyframe on the X location there, and then as soon as that's hit, I'm going to add a keyframe on the Y rotation for my logo, and then we'll skip another 15 frames, that'll be frame 60. By the way, you don't have to type in 60 if you don't want to do the calculations. You can just add the equation. Python is basically a calculator. It's a maths-based code. So I can just type in 45 plus 15, enter, and it will give me a value of 60. On here, I'll just type in 0, and we'll add that there. So as this is rotating, I want my first object to come in from the opposite side. because I don't want the objects to come in after this is rotating, otherwise it will look very stagnant. I want at least 2 elements, preferably 3 elements, animating at the same time. If I go to frame 45, add a keyframe there, and then we go to frame 60, and then we'll drag this on the GX to around about there, and we'll add a keyframe there. Let's just see what we've got. And then these other 2 elements here, we'll bring them in at the same time from frame 60. This one will be on the Z axis, keyframe on the Z. This one will be a keyframe on the X, and then that will be frame 75, another 15 frames. Every single animation is going to land on a beat, but it's 120 beats per minute. You can use an online beats per minute to frames per second calculator. Alternatively, you can just cut it in using a video editor. I like to do it all in-house with Blender. So I'm going to hit GX, we're going to drag this across till we've got that intersection point on there, and GZ, we'll drag this up to that intersection point, and then I'll add the keyframes there. Let's see what we've got so far. Okay. So with this empty object selected, I'm going to hit a keyframe on the X location. We'll add plus 15 frames, so that will take us up to frame 90. And then I'm going to hit GX, and we'll drag that across to the center point, roughly around about there. We'll add another keyframe. Of course, where this is the only object that's moving on its own, it's going to seem a bit stagnant, as you'll see. From here, I'll add a keyframe on this one. Okay, and then we go to frame 90, then I'll drag this out, GX, drag that out to about there, add a keyframe. I'm going to have another text object come down. With this empty object selected, I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm going to add another empty. We'll go Shift A, add empty, and we'll go for a cube. We'll just scale this down, scale it on the Y axis, go to side view so I can see what I'm doing. SY. We'll scale it on the X, scale it on the Z, just bring this across, GX, and I'll hit Shift S and cursor to selected. We're going to add another text object, hit text in RX90, we'll scale this down, and maybe let's say we'll choose Arial bold, and again I'm going to hit the center point for that. I'm going to type in Fotini by design. You can type in anything you liked. So I'll type in Fotini there. Duplicate that. I'll drag it down. I'm going to choose a different font. Cabri Light. And then by design. Going to select the proper material, so that was material 007. The same as for this one. I'm going to shift select both of these objects, then shift select the empty. I'm going to hit Control P to parent it. I'll drag it on the Z axis, G, Z, so around about there perhaps. Right, let's just see what I've got. All these elements coming in. So on frame 90, I'm going to add a keyframe on the Z location for this object, and then we'll skip 15 frames. So that's 105. We'll hit G, Z, and we'll drag this down to around about there, and then I'll add another keyframe here. Now to give it a bit more magic, we're going to select these objects here. This is where the graph editor comes in handy. So we're going to expand this window a bit. We're going to expand this window. Okay, I'm going to go to frame 1, hit numpad 1, so we go into front view mode here. On this, on the X location, I'm going to add a keyframe, and on the Y location, this is on frame number 1. The same with this object, location, location, the same as this one, location and location, all on the X and Y. On this empty object where it says visit my store, I'm going to add a location keyframe on X and Y, plus on the scale on X and Y, plus the rotation on X and Y. So with this first object selected, I'm going to hit X location, go to the modifiers, add modifier, and we're going to add noise. And what this does, it basically creates noise. We don't want it to be as fast, so we're going to change the scale of that to say maybe 25. and we'll reduce the strength down to maybe 0.1, just so there's a slight bit of movement in there. I'm going to click this button here, and this is going to copy that modifier, and I'm going to, actually I've made a mistake guys, so it's not the Y location that we need. I'll just add it to the Z. We'll add one to the Z here, we'll add one to the Z here, and on this object here, yeah, we want to add one on the Z there, not on the rotation but on the location. So going back to this object, we've got the modifier applied to the X location. Now we want to copy that, so we copied that modifier and we paste it on the Z location. So now it's going up and down, but we don't want it as the same seed value, so we change the offset to maybe 100. Could even turn the strength up. We'll turn the strength up to 0.2 and the scale to 50. We'll change the scale on the other one to 50 as well, just so there's a bit more movement there. So on the Z location for this, we're going to copy that modifier. We'll then go to this one, we'll open up this, and we'll go to X location, we'll paste that in, and we'll offset it to maybe 200. And we'll copy that, paste it on the Z, and we'll go to 300. We'll do the same for this one, so this will be 400 on the Z. So paste that, and we go 400. And then on the X, we'll paste it, and that will be 500. So now we've got a bit of random movement going on here. On this object, on the X location, we'll paste, and that will be an offset of 600. And on the Z location, we'll paste, and that will be offset of 700. We'll also do the X rotation, we'll paste that. We can probably offset that on 100, and we'll do the Y rotation. Actually, we don't need the X rotation. We'll take the X rotation off of that object and we'll just paste it straight onto the Y. And now we're going to do the same with the scale, so just on X and Z. So I go to the X scale, I'll paste, and maybe we'll just give it a random number, say 754. We'll do the same for the Z scale, so we'll paste and we'll give it a value of maybe 1000 for an offset. Okay, let's just see what we've got so far. With the visit my store on the scale and the rotation, I'm going to change the scale on the modifier to 25. I'm going to hit C, Control V, and Control V on the X scale. Okay. So it's just going a bit faster. I might take the scale strength down to 0.1 on both the Z and the X scale. Hey folks, I just had a major crash. I lost everything. I couldn't recover any of the data, so it's an important lesson to always hit Control S and save your scene every time, because if you have a fatal crash and you can't recover it, that's it, gone forever. A lesson learned. This is a previous scene that I made inside Blender, so it's got a few extra elements here. I'll try and reduce it down to what we had before. If you want these snow particles, you're going to have to go to a previous tutorial I made on a particle generator. I'll leave a link in the description. For now, I'm just going to get rid of that, and also all these objects here. Let's get to the rendering process. You can use cycles or you can use Eevee. Let's just so it doesn't crash, we'll switch to Eevee. And then I go into render view mode. For the world settings, I basically added a sky texture. These are the settings here, so a background of a value of strength of 0.1. I turned the sun intensity right down, and the elevation to 30 degrees, and the sun rotation to 180. Air, dust and ozone are all set to 1. I'm just wondering if I set any lamps in the scene. Yep, so I've got a couple of lamps in the scene as well. Let me see what lights I've got. So I've got a sun lamp. That's pointed straight up at a slight angle. These are the values I used for the sun, so I just gave it a value of 1 and an angle of 120 to encourage soft shadows. And then the second sun, a slight yellow tinge, a value of 1 and an angle of 50 degrees, and it's pointing down slightly. Combining that with this sun lamp and the sky texture can be found. So you go to your world settings, you add a new world, and then you hit Shift A, go to texture, sky texture, then add your sky texture in with a value of 0.1. Select your render location. I've got mine set to PNG, RGB, 16-bit with 50% compression. PNG, I believe, is lossless, so you can have quite a bit of compression. It will reduce your file size. I've also set my cache, and then it's just a case of hitting Control F12, and that will render out an image sequence, which you can then bring back into Blender as an image sequence and render it out as a video format, or you can open up those image sequences into DaVinci Resolve, which is what I do. Alternatively, if you want to render out straight as a video format, go over to here and then you select FFmpeg, and we'll go to the encoding, which is H.264. I'll probably select medium quality here, or high quality. These keyframe intervals, usually that's around about 50% of what your frame rate is. So if your frame rate is 30 frames a second, your keyframe interval will be around 15. I'll just turn it up to around about 18 because you get a slightly better quality. These classes like reference frames, and then you just hit Control F12. Don't forget to save literally every couple of minutes. Don't rely on the auto save feature, because with the version I've got of Blender 3.6, it's quite unstable. It can cause you problems. I think 3.62 is a lot more stable than this version, so you shouldn't have problems if you've got the latest version. I think they've ironed out some of these bugs. Let me just open up the end result. So this is what I've got. This is the cycles render. Could still do with a lot of work to this, you know. This is just the bare bones. That's it, folks. I hope this was helpful. Sorry about the crash, couldn't help that, it's not my fault. Anyway, have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe.